Katie and welcome back to my booktube channel. I'm super excited for today's video because I'm doing the book recommendation tag that Steph Bohr created, and I will link her channel and video below. And I recently saw Larissa from Larry Reads do it as well, and they are two of my favorite booktubers, so I'm very excited to try this out, and let's get started. First, we have a book that you tell people is your favorite, and mine is The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. This is the first book in the Dreamland Billionaire series, and this book has grumpy sunshine, workplace romance, kind of. This takes place at Dreamland, which is essentially like Disney World, and just the aesthetic of this book is so great, and I love Rowan and Zara so much. Zara is like the epitome of a sunshine character, and it is just so good. Next, we have a book that is your guilty pleasure, and I chose Diver's Heart by K.A. Knight. This book is a reverse harem, which I'm not like ashamed to admit on my book accounts, but I definitely would not tell any of my family members that I read reverse harems. But this is really interesting because they are scuba divers and they are exploring this underwater cave, and so there's also some like thriller horror elements to it, I think. And it's definitely a little scary, but also very spicy, and it's just really good. Hopefully you guys don't get too mad at me for this next one, but prompt number 3 is a book everyone loved, but you didn't. And sadly, this one is People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I loved Beach Read and Book Lovers, and so I had really high hopes for this one. And at some point, I did hear somebody say that people either love People Who Meet on Vacation or they love Beach Read, and I was really hoping I would be the exception to that, but sadly, it ended up being true, and I did not enjoy my time with this book. I'm not going to jump too much into it, but basically, there are just a lot of time jumps, which is something I've learned I don't really enjoy in books. Like, basically every chapter changes what time frame you're in. And then also, friends to lovers isn't really my favorite trope. There are a lot of books that have friends to lovers in it that I end up really enjoying. This just wasn't one of them. After that, we have a book you read the fastest, and I grabbed Zodiac Academy by Suzanne Valenti and Caroline Peckham. And it wasn't this specific book, this is the first one, but I ended up reading the first like 6 books in like a week and a half. I flew through these books, and this is like the smallest one in the series. There's other ones that are like 700-800 pages, I think. I'm not sure. I read them on my Kindle. I don't have physical copies, but they're long books, and I would read them in like a day each, which is insane. But I flew through this series, and if you haven't given it a chance, please go ahead and do that, because I wasn't too sure when I was reading this book, but if you push through and read book 2 and so on, it gets so much better. And I had to take a break after book 6, and now I know that more books have come out, and hopefully there's going to be even more. I'm not really sure, but I will be rereading this series, and I'm so excited. Number 5 is a book that deserves more hype, and I chose Mile High by Liz Tomford. I'm not sure how to say her name, but I adore this book. I haven't seen too many people talk about it. I ended up getting this recommendation from Larry Reads, and I'm so glad that she talked about it because I fell in love with this. This was a 5-star book for me. It follows a hockey team, and so our love interest is one of the hockey players. Our main character is a flight attendant on the team's plane, and it is just so good. They are so cute together, and Xander's is just such a good love interest. Like, he is such a good guy, and he cares so much about her, and I don't know. I'm not very good at explaining why I love books when I love them this much, but it's so good. This cover is stunning, and just please go pick it up and let me know what you think. Next, we have a book that is becoming a movie or TV show, and I actually haven't read this one, which might be cheating a little bit, but I do plan on reading it in the next week or 2, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have had this on my TBR for so long, and the show on Amazon just came out, I think within the last week, and I need to make sure that I read this before I start that show. But I am so excited. I've heard really good things, and I'm really interested to try this one out because I've heard that it is a book that's told in like an interview style, and I've never read a book like that, so I think it will be really cool. I did actually listen to the soundtrack of the show, even though I haven't watched it yet, and I loved it, so I am very excited. Now we have a book that you reread the most, and that has to be The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. I am a sucker for Mariana Zapata's books because slow burn romances are my favorite, especially if they are also grumpy sunshine like this one is. And this is also a sports romance. It follows a football player and his assistant. It also has marriage of convenience, and it is just so good. It has so many of my favorite tropes. And it is a long book, but it's 1000% worth it. If you love really slow burns like I do, definitely give this a try. After that, we have a book from a genre you don't typically read, and I honestly stick to the same genres. I always read romance, and I also sometimes read young adult fantasy. So this one was really hard because I don't branch out a lot. But I ended up choosing Haunting Adeline by H.D. Carlton. And the reason I picked this, I do actually read a good amount of dark romance, but this book has some like thriller horror elements to it that I don't usually read. So it definitely kind of pushed my comfort zone a little bit, but it's so good. I haven't read Hunting Adeline yet. I do own it, so I definitely need to get on that. But this is so interesting. I've never read like a stalker romance before, and I surprisingly really enjoyed it. The next one is a book that deserves all of the hype it gets, and that would be Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. This book has so many of my favorite tropes. It has small town, grumpy sunshine, kind of the single parent trope. It is just so good. If you love small town romances and just that feel of community and just all the characters you meet in this book really give you that feeling. And also Grumpy Sunshine is, I feel like, a really popular trope now, and it's one that I really, really love. And Knox is definitely a very grumpy love interest for sure, but he also is showing that he cares through his actions, and it's just really great to watch him and Naomi together. And Naomi is definitely another character that is like the epitome of sunshine. She is just so sweet and gets along with everyone. And I'm so glad that this book is as hyped up as it is because it's so cute. Up next, we have a book you usually recommend when asked to give a recommendation, and that has to be It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. I don't know what it is about this book that I am obsessed with, but it's another small town, grumpy sunshine, and it was one of the first books that I really connected to. I'm not sure why, but I just remember after finishing this book, I just like laid there and I was like hugging it for a minute because I wasn't ready to say goodbye to these characters. And it's just such a fun book concept. It's about a woman who is essentially a socialite, I think, and she ends up getting in trouble, and her dad sends her away to this small town. I know that makes her sound young, but I think she's actually like in her 30s, so she's definitely an adult, but she ends up going to the small town that Brendan is in, and he sees her and immediately tells her she does not belong there. But they end up bumping into each other, and they have a lot of chemistry together, and it is just so good. And Brendan treats her so well, and I just love them together. And this is a book I also reread a lot just because it's like a comfort book for me. So this is the first one I recommend to other people. The next prompt is a book that has your favorite characters, and I had to choose Final Offer by Lauren Asher. This just came out a couple months ago, and this is the final book in the Dreamland Billionaires series, and like I was saying, Lauren Asher is one of my favorite authors, and her characters feel like real people to me, which doesn't always happen when I'm reading, and this book is just great because you also get to see the couples from the first two books in the series as well. They hang out with each other, and it's just so fun to watch all of their banter. So I definitely had to go with this one. You see Rowan and Zara from the fine print, which I mentioned earlier. You get Iris and Declan from Terms and Conditions, and then you also get Cal and Lana from this book. So it's definitely a vibe, and this is such a good book. After that, we have A Book You Wish You Could Live In, and this was one of the trickiest prompts for me because I love so many books and so many of like the friend groups you get to meet. And I also thought about picking a fantasy book, but I feel like I would honestly die in like all of the fantasies I read, so I couldn't pick one of those. I ended up choosing Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. This is the companion novel to It Happened One Summer, and you get to see Hannah, who is Piper from Book One's sister, and then you also see Fox, who is Brendan's crewmate, and this is a friends to lovers romance, and they are adorable. But what I love, again, is the small town in here, and it's a small town that is like right on the water, and just the way it's described, I feel like I would have so much fun living in that town for a while, so I had to go with this because I would just love to visit a town like that. Then we have A Book You Thought You Would Hate but Ended Up Loving, and I ended up choosing Ice Planet Barbarian by Ruby Dixon. I have only read the first 2 books in this series, but when I first heard about this, I really did not think I was going to like it, but I was so intrigued because it seemed so out there, and I ended up buying this and giving it a chance, even though our love interest is literally a blue alien. And I had a lot of fun with this. It's not my like all-time favorite book by any means. I think I ended up giving it like 3.5 stars, but there's just something so fun about these books, and I had a great time. So it really surprised me. On the complete opposite side of the spectrum, this next prompt is a book that made you cry, and it takes a lot to make me cry when I'm reading. I usually just like really feel the emotions deeply, but I don't usually cry physical tears. But this next book got me, and that is Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan. I've heard amazing things about Kennedy Ryan's books, but this is the first one I ended up reading. Definitely check trigger warnings, and actually just go ahead and check trigger warnings for most of the books because I know that I had some other dark romances that probably have triggers as well, but this book is extremely sad, and I was crying a few different times throughout this book because I really feel for the characters, and I feel for everybody in the world that goes through anything similar to this. This book focuses very heavily on domestic violence, and even now, just thinking about what these characters went through, I feel like I'm gonna cry. It's so well written, and if it's not something that's triggering to you, I highly recommend you reading this book because it hits really hard, and I really loved connecting with these characters and getting to know them, even though it was such a devastating and sad book. It does have a happy ending, don't worry. All of the books I read have happy endings, but it still makes me very emotional. Up next, we have A Book You Wish You Could Read Again for the First Time, and I ended up choosing The Deal by Elle Kennedy. This was the first spicy romance that I had read. Up until this point, I was reading mostly young adult books, and even the like adult romance I was reading, they were purely like rom-coms, but this was one of the first like sports romances and also just like spicy books that I had read, and I just really wish I could go back and experience that again. But I do remember really enjoying this book, and I don't know, I just think it'd be really fun to go back. I feel like I don't need to explain what this book's about. I'm sure you've seen it. But it's a hockey romance. She ends up tutoring him, and in return, he's supposed to help her get noticed by the guy that she likes. But they end up falling for each other in the process. And it's just so good. This whole series is good because you get to meet another really good friend group. This next prompt was a little tricky for me because I'm currently going through that, but it is a book that can cure a reading slump, and I chose Throttled by Lauren Asher. Again, one of my favorite authors, so I would highly recommend any of her books. And this prompt was tricky for me because a lot of the books I really enjoy are slow burns, and I feel like that's not something you need when you're already in a reading slump. I feel like you need something that's a little faster paced and just really grabs you from the beginning. And this is an F1 racing book. It's the first book in the Dirty Air series, and it's definitely not my favorite of the series, but this is one of the faster paced ones because it is not a slow burn. It is brother's rival. So she ends up going with her brother, who is an F1 racer. She ends up going with him on their, like, I don't know if it's called a tour. I don't really know anything about F1 racing other than what I've read in these books. But through their season, she goes with them and she's vlogging the whole time. But Noah is her brother's rival and they're on the same team. So she bumps into him everywhere and their chemistry is undeniable. It's so good. It's spicy. And it's just a good introduction to Lauren Asher and to the F1 racing world that you get to experience in this series. It's really good. Hopefully this would help somebody get out of a reading slump. If you have other suggestions, let me know in the comments because I've been really struggling to read recently, so I am in a reading slump myself. I would love suggestions. Then we have a book you think everyone should read. I picked Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. Stephanie Garber is the author that got me back into reading during quarantine. It's the whole reason I have all of these books behind me, and I just adore her and I adore her writing. And I feel like Once Upon a Broken Heart is something for everyone. You get fantasy, you get romance, the atmosphere and just the world building. It's just so good. It's so magical and it draws you in. And I can't explain it. Like, there's something about her writing that's just so magical. And I feel like there's something for everyone in this book. And it is one of my favorite books of all time. I have some more copies behind me. I have 5 copies of this book because I have no self-control. But I would love for everyone to give this book a chance. I guess I should probably tell you a little about it. This book follows Evangeline Fox, and she has pink hair. That doesn't really define her as a person, but I think it's a really fun fact. And she's super, like, whimsical and just adorable. But this book starts with her realizing that the man that she loves is about to marry another person. And so she runs to find the Prince of Hearts, who is a very powerful fate. And she makes a deal with him for him to stop the wedding in exchange for 3 kisses at a time of his choosing. And if you haven't read the Caraval series where we get to meet the Prince of Hearts, essentially there's a rumor that kissing him could be deadly. But part of this deal is that the kisses are not with him, they're with other people just whenever he chooses. And so they have this deal together, and it's a super fun dynamic because she is like the epitome of a sunshine, good girl. Like, she's so sweet and innocent, and then he is known as this villain. So I really love that dynamic. And just all the things that happen throughout this book, it's just so good. There's also vampires in this series, which is a fun little twist. It's not like the main part of the book, but it definitely comes into play, and I don't know, trying to describe this to you guys makes me want to reread it. It's so good and magical, and I loved seeing Evangeline and the Prince of Hearts interact because the Prince of Hearts is definitely my favorite character from the Caraval series. So if you love him as much as I do, this is for you. The next prompt is a book you think would make an amazing movie, and that has to be Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. This is another one of my favorite fantasies, and you get amazing world building again. You get romance, and it's so good. The concept of this book is just amazing, and I would love to see it as a movie, or honestly, probably even a TV show. I think a TV show might even be better. But there are 7 princes of hell, and Wrath is one of the princes. That's the one that this series focuses on. And our main character, her name is Amelia, and she is a witch, and her twin ends up disappearing at the beginning, and when she goes to find her, she finds her desecrated body and makes it her mission to figure out what happened to her sister. And so she makes a deal with Wrath that they will work together to figure out what happened because he also needs to know. And it is an interesting dynamic again. The difference is Amelia is very badass, like on her own, and then you pair her with one of the most powerful demons in the world. And it is just, it's so interesting to watch them together. Wrath is one of my favorite book boyfriends, and I just think this world would be so cool as a TV show. I'd be really worried that they wouldn't be able to do it justice, but I would love to watch them try. I would love to see more from Wrath and Amelia. Next, we have a book you wish everyone would give a shot, even if it's out of their comfort zone. And I chose From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata. I know that slow burns are not for everyone, but even though this is a slow burn and it is a long book, it is so good. It is a figure skating romance, and it's grumpy, I guess. It's not really Grumpy Sunshine. They're both honestly kind of grumpy, but they have really good banter, and just their connection by the end of the book it's so good and so sweet. And they end up having to team up even though they essentially hate each other. And you watch them having to work through their trust issues because as a figure skating duo, he has to like throw her in the air and they do all these crazy tricks. So it's just really interesting to watch them have to push through their hatred for one another. And it ends up being so sweet. And it was really cool because I personally can't figure skate. So I love living through characters that are doing things that are impossible to me. It's so sweet. And I love Ivan and Jasmine. I forgot her name for a second. That's embarrassing. But I wish everyone would give this a chance, even if you don't like slow burn. And last but not least, our final prompt is a book that you will never forget. And I picked Still Beating by Jennifer Hartman. Definitely check trigger warnings for this one. This is one of the darkest books I've ever read, which is why it is one that I will never forget. It is super emotional. This is another book that made me cry, honestly. But basically, our main characters, he is her sister's fiance, I think, and they don't get along. But her car ends up breaking down, I think, is how the book starts. And he comes to help her. They both end up getting kidnapped together. And the guy that kidnaps them, he always kidnaps, there we go, people in pairs because his goal is to force them to fall in love with each other and then kill them, which is super dark and twisted. I know. It sounds horrible. But you watch these people that absolutely hate each other start to really care for each other and try to protect each other. And it is so emotional. And not only do you experience their time while they're kidnapped, but you also get to see what happens after the fact. Hopefully that's not a spoiler, but it's just, you really get to see them working through their trauma and bonding, and it's so dark. I'm gonna cry again. It's just very impactful, and I will never forget this book. That's kind of a sad note to end this book tag on, but hopefully you guys found some new book recommendations. If you have any for me, let me know in the comments. I am always looking for more books to add to my TBR, even though it's already super long. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you do end up subscribing, please click the notification bell so you know when I upload next. Thank you guys so much for watching. I can't wait to see you in my next video.